Our advocates. I am so proud of the work you do. You really give me hope when I see how you're out there in the cold and in the heat over the summer and just out there doing what you know we are called to do at this time. From day one, keeping people safe has been my #1 priority. For 4.5 years, I have partnered with law enforcement leaders across the state. As I mentioned, many of them are joining us here today. We've worked hard to drive down crime, reform our laws, and provide more tools to put criminals behind bars, those who would do harm to our communities. But all of us have a core belief that public safety must be pursued lawfully, transparently, and with humanity. And yet these very principles have been abandoned by our federal government and our immigration officers. In every corner of our state, New Yorkers are feeling traumatized and stunned as they watch federal agents carry out unspeakable acts of violence in a country they no longer recognize. They're questioning whether our own federal government, their own federal government, is there to help them or to hurt them. And for weeks, our eyes have been turned to the horrors unfolding in the streets of Minneapolis, where federal agents murdered Alex Preddy, 37-year-old American citizen, an ICU nurse at a VA hospital, a protector and a patriot. Earlier this month, in that same city, federal agents shot Renee Good in the face as she was looking to leave in her vehicle. A mother of 3 killed in cold blood. For what? Exercising her First Amendment rights. And yesterday, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey implored fellow leaders around the country to speak up because they know their county, their city, their state could be next. We hear that call. We have heeded that call. And both the Minneapolis murders and the Trump administration's response to those murders has been nothing short but callous and yet sadly predictable. What do first? Step 1, deny responsibility. Step 2, smear the victims, call them domestic terrorists without a shred of evidence. And step 3, tell the American people not to believe what they're seeing with their own eyes. Someone should alert the White House that in a democracy, the government does not get to rewrite reality after the fact, not here in this country. And what has become so apparent, that this is not just about immigration policy. This is about a blatant, dangerous abuse of power. And I'm so much so that I'm reminded of Thomas Paine's sentiments. Anyone's watching Ken Burns' American Revolution. Tyranny, like Hal, he said, is not easily conquered. That's true, but they conquered it 250 years ago. We are called to act in this moment of tyranny. This is about a rogue federal agency that's been unleashed on the American streets for the sole purpose of creating chaos, carnage, and fear. The Trump administration has encouraged these agents to treat the American people, as if they are the enemy, with their inane quotas executed by masked, armed, poorly trained paramilitary forces. They've created a culture that has no restraint, where calls for accountability are sneered at, and where violence against American citizens is normalized. Nationwide, over the last 13 months, ICE has detained hundreds of individuals, including thousands of individuals, including hundreds of U.S. citizens. Dozens of people have died in their custody, and this is the inevitable result of leadership that values force over law, fear over facts. And as I said, the leader of this, Kristi Noem, has forfeited her right to lead and should resign immediately. Do the right thing. Go home. No longer serve in that important role. Put someone in there who understands the boundaries of the laws. And while much of this country seems unrecognizable, here in New York, We know who we are. That is precisely why we must step in now and act immediately. Now, as Mike said, my top priority is protecting New Yorkers. When individuals enter this country illegally and commit crimes, I want them arrested and tried. If they're convicted, they must be imprisoned and deported. That's what we've been doing for decades here. Because I need to protect the immigrant community from criminals as well. And since I became the governor, we have turned over 1,400 convicted criminals to ICE, already served their time here, paid their debt to society, and are now sent where they came from. We've also ramped up our presence on the northern border. We have a long border, over 432 miles with Canada. We want to stop the flow of guns, human trafficking, violence, gangs. We'll focus on that. Just last August, New York State Police worked with federal law enforcement to break up a gun smuggling operation run by transnational crimes. That's what we want to do. That's what ICE should be doing. That's what Border Patrol should be doing. That's their job. So make no mistake, because others are going to lie about what I'm saying right now, and you can count on this. Be ready for the lies. We will always cooperate with federal government to bring violent criminals to justice. Full stop. That's not a change in policy. However, it does not mean that New York State will stand for flagrant abuse of power under the guise of public safety. Now, under current law, federal law, which says it is subject to state and local laws, check this out, ICE can enter into formal agreements with local law enforcement agencies to use their offices, their personnel, their jails, and other resources to do ICE's job. Now, what this means is they're doing ICE's job, and instead of focusing on their own job, which is keeping their communities safe. Local police officers ordered to serve as ICE agents, harassing innocent people and ripping families apart in their own communities. Now, it's not like ICE needs the help. Okay? Not long ago, they were a $6 billion agency. Now they have over $85 billion at their disposal, right? Half my budget. So they have what they need. So don't buy in the argument we have to be there because ICE needs the help. They do their job, although I don't like the way they're doing their job, but don't expect our local law enforcement to team up with them because we have other responsibilities for our local law enforcement. They should not need local police to do their jobs. That's why today I'm proposing a new law that'll ban these agreements. We call it the Local Cops, Local Crimes Act. Very simply, local police focus on local crimes, focus on protecting our streets. And I'll work closely with my partners in the legislature to get this passed as quickly as possible. So we'll find more ways to protect our communities because we see what happens when the lines get blurred. And law enforcement will tell you that the mistrust that is now created by this agency out of control affects their ability to do their jobs because people don't know the distinction here as easily. So we want people to trust and have community policing and local law enforcement that responds to the crimes that are committed. We have retail theft, we have guns on the streets, we have gangs, we have drugs. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that our law enforcement has enough on their hands, and our DAs have enough to do without turning into deputized ICE agents here in New York. Because this has gotten out of hand. Last fall on Long Island, federal agents had deputized local police to do what? To detain a Roosevelt High School senior after a minor nonviolent offense. This young man was beloved by his teachers and his classmates. They were so shaken to hear that this had happened in their own community. He'd been shipped off to a jail hundreds of miles away. And I know New Yorkers want to make sure that their hard-earned tax dollars are spent wisely. I don't think they want them using tax dollars to abduct nonviolent teenagers in their high schools. They want local police focused on local crime. Like I said, responding to emergencies, going after the gangs, taking on the real public safety challenges, and protecting neighborhoods the way they know best. Not diverting limited resources and personnel away from their sworn duty to fulfill these ridiculous quotas on the taxpayer's dime. So today, with this proposal, we're sending a strong message to ICE. You will not weaponize local police officers against their own communities in the state of New York. You will not use our police technology to track people who've done nothing wrong. We will not throw innocent people into our jails. And you will do everything only with a judicial order, an order from a judge who says there has been a crime committed when you're coming after our people in the state. But on the jails, ICE relies on our detention centers, right? They want to build them up. They want the capacity. Before a surge, they increase the capacity. We've seen this in other states. And they want to use the jails for that purpose. They use our jails to round up people. Now, here's my view. Our jails should be used for what our sheriffs need them for, a place to hold people accused of a crime before they have their trial or for misdemeanors. There is a purpose for the jails now. But cutting off access to our jails to ICE agents will make it harder for them to operate these large-scale operations, which they're building up to try and do right now in the state of New York. We've seen the warning signs. It's happening. That's what they did in Minneapolis. Get large-scale detention centers, use the local jails for these purposes, and that's what we want to head off. Now, I'll say it 100 times because you're going to hear differently out in the streets, probably being tweeted out right now. Local police will continue to help federal agents track down violent criminals. This never has changed. It never will change. But what I don't want them doing, and they will no longer do, is aid armed forces who think they can occupy our streets, scare our children, round up our neighbors separated and rounded up just because of the color of their skin. That is happening even in our own state of New York. It's no longer going to happen with the help of our local law enforcement. That ends now. Now, today's actions builds on the promises I made in my State of the State address just a couple weeks ago, which clearly stay. Anytime your constitutional rights are violated, anytime federal agents operate outside the scope of law, New Yorkers should be able to hold them accountable in court. They already do for local and state officers. Why are the federal agents exempt from this? No longer in the state of New York. And as I said, no one is above the law. We also want to have sensitive locations. I laid out a series of sensitive locations that will be off limits to ICE civil immigration enforcement unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. I will repeat this because they need to hear this. Schools, daycare centers, houses of worship, and hospitals, letting our nurses know that this will be banned in the state of New York. And today, never thought I'd have to do this, but I feel compelled to add homes to that list because the Fourth Amendment protects people and stops federal agents from forcibly entering their home without a warrant, but they're doing it anyhow. So I feel obligated to add homes to a list that I just identified. But since the federal government is more than willing to ignore the Constitution to suit their own purposes, I'm going to codify that into state law. Now, as I'm wrapping up here, our actions are grounded with a common sense principle, real common sense. Who can disagree with this? Local cops focus on local crimes, right? You can get behind that. Not working with ICE to round up innocent people and terrorize communities. The people in this country are not confused. They're not naive. They know the difference between public safety and public displays of force. Public displays of brute force simply meant to instill fear. That is what has been unleashed in cities across America. And the people of this country do know what they're seeing unfold before their eyes, and no amount of spin will convince them to unsee it. And regardless of who's running DHS, regardless of who's in the White House, here in New York, we'll always uphold public safety lawfully and with humanity. To paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, when he was asked what form of government they just created, he said, "We created a republic if you can keep it." If you can keep it. I never thought in my lifetime that republic would be so fragile. Our democracy being ripped apart at the seams. To the patriots of 250 years ago and the patriots of today, some in this room, I'm here to say we intend to keep our republic and our democracy strong. Now, anyone who believes that eliminating these agreements between ICE and local police will somehow make New York less safe, you're going to hear that one too, mark my words, you ought to listen to our next speaker. New York City Police Department does not have an agreement with ICE. And guess what? Crime is hitting record lows. They have one of the greatest police departments in the world. They know their lane. They know what they do. They're not turning into ICE agents, terrorizing the streets and the people that they're trying to build trust with. That's not how it works. And we are so fortunate that this department is led by an incredible commissioner who's committed to doing it the right way. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Hochul, for your leadership on this issue and for your unwavering support of the New York City Police Department. The NYPD stands with the governor in support of this crucial legislation. Plain and simple, in 2026, local police departments should not be turned into federal immigration agents or pushed into responsibilities that undercut effective local policing. Earlier this month, I was privileged to stand with the governor to announce our 2025 end-of-year crime stats, which reflect exactly that. The lowest number of shooting incidents and shooting victims on record. The safest year on our subways outside the pandemic years since 2009. Major crime down in all 5 boroughs. That is the direct result of this department doing the work that we are tasked with, focusing on crime and public safety. Now, let me be clear. The NYPD does not engage in civil immigration enforcement, period. We do not ask people about their immigration status, and we do not do civil immigration enforcement on behalf of the federal government. At the same time, that approach has never prevented us from working closely with federal partners, the FBI, the DEA, for example, on serious criminal matters. We have deeply important partnerships with federal agencies, and we work side by side with them on a variety of cases that are vital to public safety, including terrorism, violence, guns, and gang cases, regardless of the subject's immigration status. That cooperation is important, and it continues, and this legislation does not interfere with that work. But when federal immigration operations come into a city and generate fear, anger, unrest, local police do not get to walk away from the consequences. They are the ones who stay, who respond to the next 911 call, who work to keep neighborhoods stable, and who have to rebuild trust that may have been damaged by actions that they themselves did not take. That makes the job harder and our communities less safe. Let me be clear, the NYPD is committed to doing the work and building the trust that will ensure the safety of every New Yorker. So thank you again, Governor Hochul. We appreciate your partnership on this issue and your continued commitment to public safety. I'll now introduce Albany Police Chief Brendan Cox.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Governor Hochul, for your leadership and your unwavering commitment to keeping New Yorkers safe. I've seen that firsthand. There's been historic investments in law enforcement, including technology, and for the Albany Police Department and the Capital Region, and certainly New York State, strengthening our laws holding criminals accountable, and committing over $3 billion to public safety since you've been governor. Under Governor Hochul, shootings in New York have fallen to the lowest level in recorded history in 2025. Major crime is declining across every category. New York is one of the safest, largest states in the nation. And we've seen that in Albany. In Albany, we had shootings fall by 60% last year, including shooting victims fall by 60%. But while governor of our state and local partners have made tremendous progress here in New York, recent events that we've seen in Minneapolis have underscored why we are here today. There's a fundamental truth that every chief in this state knows. Effective policing needs the trust of our communities, between our officers and our communities. That trust is being eroded and broken as innocent American citizens have been killed under the guise of enforcing federal immigration law. These actions have not made anyone safer. Current federal immigration efforts have only created chaos and fear, undermining our democracy and public's confidence. These events have shattered the trust of law enforcement that we rely on to keep our neighborhoods safe. And I just want to note, we've seen that firsthand. We've been out in the community, we've been enforcing laws and trying to ultimately drive down violent crime, only to see people see local law enforcement thinking we're ICE, thinking we're there to take them away and deport them, and having to actually use our skills, which our officers are very skilled at, to de-escalate a situation and let people know that we are not there to do that. We are there actually to make them safer. And I've seen that firsthand with the officers that ultimately I supervise, the skills they have to spend hours to talk somebody out of a house, to let them know that they're there for their safety, not there to deport them. Trust directly impacts public safety. When that trust is broken, when residents fear calling the police, when victims stay silent, when witnesses refuse to come forward, we all become less safe. It's that simple. Trust is not just good policy, it's public safety. That's why local law enforcement should be focused on fighting local crime and keeping our communities safe. And we must end these agreements with federal immigration officers. As the commissioner said, we don't need those. We already have partnerships with our federal partners, and we can continue to do those. Banning these agreements can keep us safer, keep law enforcement focused on our serious crimes, and local agencies are most effective when spending time investigating crime, not civil law enforcement, especially when many of us are already facing staffing challenges that we need to address those staffing challenges and address crime, not civil enforcement. I don't enforce tax law. I'm not going to enforce civil enforcement. Let me be clear. This isn't about refusing to cooperate on criminal matters. We will continue to do that. It's about that nexus to public safety. Let me add, no one is above the law. Not me as a police chief, not the district attorneys we stand with here today, but especially also not our federal agents. For people to maintain confidence in law enforcement, we need clear, meaningful accountability when constitutional rights are violated. And we need to ensure that mechanisms for such accountability exist, as they exist for us in local law enforcement. State and local officers are already held to these standards, and the governor's proposal simply ensures federal officers operating in New York are held to these same standards. Lastly, we must preserve the institutions our communities depend on. For decades, under administrations of both parties, federal policy limited warrantless immigration enforcement in schools, hospitals, and houses of worship. Our communities are centered around these places, and New Yorkers should be able to take their children to school, seek medical help, and worship in peace. Professional policing must be the rule, not the exception. That means officers who de-escalate, respect rights, and who understand their authority come with responsibility. Governor Hochul's proposals are about ensuring every community in New York can trust law enforcement at every level, and that we operate with professionalism, accountability, and respect. That is the standard we hold ourselves to every day, and that's the standard for everyone who wears a badge in our great state. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll take a few questions. I'm happy to take questions, but I just want to say, right before I came out here, I read an account that has still left me very disturbed. That in a state in America, there was a young couple that had just taken their 1-month-old baby to apply for a U.S. passport as a U.S. citizen, and ICE agents surrounded the vehicle, pulled over, bitter cold, they smashed the driver's side window to extract the father and left the mother and the baby surrounded in glass inside the vehicle, left them alone in the cold, bitter temperatures. A 1-month-old? Freezing? I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, I got a six-month-old grandbaby. You know how hard people work to save and protect their children? And you expose them like that? My God, what has happened to this country? What has happened here? We're taking steps today. We're standing up and saying who we are. But can we just remember we're America? We once were so admired by the rest of the world, and now we're ashamed. Mr. President, can we just stand down the assault on the American people and our children and our babies? Can we just stop? There's a lot of other issues. Let's focus on driving down prices and helping people get health care and taking care of them, giving them homes, helping with their utility bills. We have so much we have to do to help people. But stories like this make you just question who we are. And this country has become unrecognizable. But in New York, we know who we are. We will stand up. We will change the laws to make sure that people know we will protect them. And heaven help us. Thank God for the clergy here. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for being on the streets and helping these people who are so scared. They're not even going to churches. They're not going to schools. They're not going to daycares. Someday we'll try to put the genie back in the bottle, I guess. Go back to January 19, 2025. Try to pick up the pieces. But until then, we are called. We are morally called and challenged at this moment in history to stand with our voices, our offices, our faith, to stand up for people who are God's children. Whether they're here searching for a better life, they're living lawfully, following the laws, whether it's an American citizen who doesn't deserve to be shot in the face and murdered, or shot multiple times on the ground defenseless. I've always believed we're better than this. And in my heart, I know we are, because we are still a government of the people, and the people have had enough. Any questions?
The ending of the 27 agreements, a couple of municipalities already have them, like Nassau County. Does that mean they'll be null and void now? And if they don't end that collaboration, are you also going to cut off state resources to these counties? And I have a follow-up.
Once a law is passed, every municipality is required to follow the law. And the consequences of breaking the law in the state of New York is the Attorney General will bring action and it'll be taken to court for enforcement.
Have you talked to Bruce Blakeman? I mean, he's your Republican opponent. Is this a shot across the bow at him? Also, do you think that ICE should be abolished? The mayor of New York City believes in that.
I don't accept the characterization that this is a shot against anybody. I'm doing this for my state. We have 62 counties, and a few of them, and you'd be happy to know that the vast majority do not have these agreements, that the vast majority of sheriff's offices do not have these agreements. It is a smaller subset. So it has nothing to do with who's running for office. This is the right thing to do in this moment. And ICE desperately needs to be reformed and retrained. But we also have to have borders that are protected. We don't want criminals and gang members coming across the borders. We need to have that. But what it has morphed into under Donald Trump and Kristi Noem shocks the conscience. So that is my position.
Sticking on topic, Rebecca. What has changed since your State of the State that you're now proposing this? You've been asked about the New York for All Act, for example, which this is a key component of several times, and you have either demurred or said you are not ready to support it or don't want to impede local sovereignty. So what has changed?
No, this was not supported by the legislature. It hasn't been passed. right? New York, if you're referring to New York for All, it only passed one of the houses of the legislature last year, so it's never gotten to my desk, number one. But yes, there are elements that are certainly important, and I want to have the conversations with the legislature. It's just New York for All originated with the legislature, so we'll be having conversations as we go forward. But this is something that I feel that as I survey and find out how many of these agreements we actually have and how they're being abused. I think it was, the first trigger was, so who went after the high school student? It was local police officers. As I gathered more information, I realized this is being abused in our own state, and I needed to take action. But certainly Minneapolis focus all of us on constant communication. And although we were talking about this in December, so I don't know what date it changed, Rebecca. It's just I announced a number of policies. You'll be hearing more, and this is not the end. This is not the end of the conversation. We're going to continue doing more and working with the legislature to get this over the finish line.
Any other topics? All right, thank you guys.
Well, actually, the police commissioner left and had a couple questions for her. Have either you or the police commissioner had conversations about potential increased ICE presence within New York City? Because we haven't seen what we've seen in Minneapolis. Are you worried that we could? Have you had any indication from either Trump or Tom Homan?
No, but I see the signs. They're building up capacity to detain people because right now they don't have enough capacity to do the large-scale surge of ICE agents. I'm not saying they will, and I hope to God they don't come because our police are busy enough. Our state police, our sheriffs, local chiefs of police, they're all busy people. They've got a lot to do to keep us safe, and it's been successful. You can't dispute that the crime is down in the state of New York because of a lot of hardworking people, some standing behind me. So I don't want them to have a surge, no, but when they're trying to build a large-scale facility in Orange County, and the county executive doesn't want that, and we don't want that, and they're looking at other facilities in other parts of our state to build, I'm watching the trends here. Why are they doing that if they're scaling back? I think the opposite could be ready. So that's the sign. They've not told us they are, Bernadette. I don't expect to get a handwritten note saying we're coming in a couple of weeks, but they're going to show up at some point, and I want to be prepared, change the laws now, do what we have to do to fortify ourselves, and part of it is reminding local police. We respect what they do. We know they're trying to build trust with communities, and I want local police focused on local communities fighting local crime. That's it. That's all this is about. Not to deputize you to be part of an agency that is huge, bloated, untrained. The hours of training that goes to be one of these new ICE agents is shocking compared to what we have to do to become a state police officer. There's no comparison. How often how are they trained in conflict de-escalation? How many hours have you spent on conflict de-escalation and not whipping out your gun as the first reaction? Maybe we'd have 2 more 37-year-olds alive if they had followed the same thing we do here in New York. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our program. Thank you.
This has been breaking news.